5 years ago, I buried my daughter. Today, she stands on my porch in the rain, her hair plastered to her cheeks, whispering, "Don't open the door for them. They've come to take the house." I didn't gasp. I placed my palm against the glass and looked at her, at the scar above her eyebrow from a bike accident in 7th grade, at the crooked second tooth she refused to get filled because it made her smile in her own way. Her voice was quiet and confident, like it had been at 12. "Who?" My words fogged the glass. She glanced over her shoulder. A sedan pulled up to the curb, its headlights off, its windshield wipers ticking like a metronome. "Please, Mom, let me in. Hurry." I lifted the chain and opened the door. Warm air rushed out. Rain and the ghost of familiar spirits rushed into the room. "Natalie," I said, and the name swung between us like a rope. "How is this possible?" "I'll explain," she said, "but not now." I closed the door and slid the bolt. The clock above the stove read 6:15. The apricot tree outside shook the water from its leaves like a wet dog. Ordinary little things have a way of clinging to the edges of extraordinary moments. I handed her a towel. Her hands trembled as she took it. My daughter, the one I'd kissed goodbye in the cemetery 5 years ago, now stood on my rug with mud on her shoes and a fresh bruise on her chin. "Who hurt you?" I asked. "And how did you end up here?" I saw. "An empty coffin," she said softly. "It wasn't me they buried." She flinched at the knock. 3 light taps, then a pause, then 2 more. "Don't open the door." My heart pounded in my throat. "Tell me now, Natalie, why did I bury an empty coffin?" "Because you were only safe because you were alive," she replied. "Because I ran away. Because I had to force him to let me go." "Him," I repeated, even though I knew. The son-in-law who grinned toothlessly and blindly. The man who had promised me, placing his hand on my shoulder at the wake, that he would carry on her memory. "Evan," she nodded. "He wasn't alone." It all got bigger. Loans I didn't know about. A mortgage I never signed. When I pressed the doorbell, he showed me a paper with your name on it and said he would solve his problem, and yours too. Another knock. "Mrs. Carter?" A pleasant male voice. "We're here about a routine inspection. Give us 10 minutes of your time." "I wasn't planning anything," I said, loud enough to be heard. "County ordinance," the voice replied. Notification was mailed. Natalie grabbed my wrist, her fingers cold and desperate. "They're not county. They're the men he hired when the bank stopped answering his calls. If you open the door, they'll say you invited them in. They'll take photos, measure thresholds, claim it's unsafe. They'll post a notice that scares off anyone who could help you. By the end of the week, you'll have a padlock on your gate and a sale date stapled to your fence. How could my own son-in-law do this to me?" It wasn't the question I meant to ask, but it was the one that flew out and hovered, ugly and shaking. "It isn't just him," she said. "I'm sorry." I thought of the box we'd lowered into damp earth, of tulips bobbing in wind, of the way grief can turn a house into a museum. I thought of the day last month when a letter slid through my mail slot with my name misspelled and a logo that looked like someone had traced it from a billboard with a shaky hand. Urgent. Action required. I'd put it under a cookbook. Then the phone calls began, polite, then stern, then oily. I told myself it was a scam. I told myself I was not a woman who could be frightened from her own kitchen. I looked at my daughter. "What do you need me to do?" "Trust me," she said. "And don't open the door." The knocking resumed, heavier. "Mrs. Carter will have to mark this as refusal to comply. It will affect the disposition of your property. I walked to the entry table and flipped the little brass switch on the old voice memo app. It wasn't hooked to a landline anymore, but the microphone still worked. A red bulb winked on. I set my phone to record. I have learned the power of keeping a clean record. What was said, what time, what face accompanied which threat. "Gentlemen," I called, "you are on my porch without appointment. I am a woman living alone. I am not opening my door. Leave whatever papers you have in the mailbox." Silence. Then the whisper of rain and the adapter's low whine in the hallway socket. The sedan's engine cut. We stood still long enough for my calves to ache. Finally, footsteps receded, a car door closed, another. The sedan pulled away, taillights liquid in the rain. Natalie sagged against the wall and covered her face with the towel. When she dropped it, her eyes were rimmed red but dry. "I couldn't keep running," she said. "I thought you were safe." I was wrong. I poured tea with hands that only shook when I set the cups down. "He'll be back." "He will," she said. "With someone you trust." The lemon cake cooled. The clock ticked smugly toward 7. Somewhere down the block, a child laughed. And I remembered the chalk drawings my daughter made on this same porch. Suns with too many rays, crooked cats, the word home with each letter in a different color. "Tell me everything," I said. "Start with the part that made you fake your death." She took a breath that reached her toes. "I didn't fake it." "He did. I tasted metal." "Explain." "He took out life insurance on me and forged my signature. He told me it was a new health plan through his work. When I noticed premiums I hadn't agreed to, he laughed it off. I went to the insurer anyway. A woman there showed me files with my name spelled right and wrong in different places. She whispered that something felt off. 2 weeks later, I found a letter hidden in his truck. Accelerated payout options if the insured is terminal. That night I confronted him." She lifted her chin. "He hit me first. Then he cried. Then he told me he loved me too much to let me leave him with his debts." I felt my mouth flatten. "What debts?" "Not gambling. Worse. He was giving kickbacks to a consultant for contracts that never materialized. When the firm started asking questions, the consultant said it was all Evan's idea. He had to pay it back. With interest." "And me?" I asked. "He knew you kept your papers in the cedar box under your bed," she said. "He knew you wouldn't read a document with enough stamps on it if someone you loved handed you a pen and said it would make things simpler." "Is that what you did?" I asked before I could stop myself. "I tried to stop him," she said. "Mom, I left. I planned to come here that night, but he had my phone, my keys, my bag. He had the insurer convinced I was sick. He had a friend at the funeral home who owed him a favor. And there was a fire at a storage unit nearby. A woman died there, unclaimed. He bought a box and a service and a small patch of ground. I sat back. The tea went cold, untouched. "I mourned cardboard," I said, "and I brought flowers to a stranger's dirt." "Not a stranger," she whispered. "Someone for whom no one else came." I told myself that mattered, that maybe my name on the stone gave her one too. We listened to the house shift and settle. Rain softened. Natalie took both my hands. "I've been alive in motels and shelters, working under the table, saving enough to come back and fight. But I heard what he did with your property taxes. I heard how your mailbox filled with threats. I knew I was out of time." My voice steadied into something that sounded like the woman I raised her to be. "I am not out of fight." She smiled, shaky but real. And in it, I saw the girl who once skinned both knees on the same day and said it made her aerodynamic. "Then let's start," she said. I didn't sleep. I made lists, numbers of neighbors who still owed me favors, a retired beat cop 2 streets over who walked my dog during chemo, the church secretary who once organized an entire fair in 3 phone calls, the bank manager who sends me a Christmas card with handwritten ink. I wrote down what mattered. The date of the first letter, the names used on the phone, the phrases, compliance inspection, imminent hazard, designed to sound official, but just off enough to set a tooth on edge. At dawn, I put on my raincoat and walked the block. The sedan had not returned. The apricot tree flung sunshine through clean air. I dug the birdhouse camera out of the drawer and screwed it back into place on the porch beam. I set the tiny microphone behind the ceramic cat on the windowsill. I texted the retired cop, Roger, and the bank manager, Asha. I do not use emojis. My punctuation means what it says. By 9, Asha had called me back and listened without interrupting. "Bring whatever they send," she said, "and bring someone you trust to sit beside you." "I'll bring my daughter," I said. A small silence. Then, "I look forward to meeting her." At 10, Roger showed up with coffee and a notebook. He scanned the mailbox leaflets and snorted. County seal's wrong. Fonts are cousins, not twins. But they're getting slicker. Will slicker save them in court? I asked. Probably not, he said. But it might get you to panic. Panic makes good people sign things. He glanced at Natalie, who sat in my father's old chair with a blanket knotted around her shoulders. You sure about the basics? I am, I said. But we will need more than sure. We agreed on 2 rules: no answering unknown numbers, no opening the door without a camera rolling. When the phone rang at 10:43, the voice memo app clicked to life. Mrs. Carter, a woman purred. You were uncooperative last night. Will be at your property again at noon with authorization. Refusal will be documented. I let the red light blink. Then I called the county code office myself. A man named Terrence put me on hold long enough for me to count to 300, then came back with a voice that had lost its lazy morning warmth. We have no inspection scheduled at your address, he said. If someone shows up, call the police. Would you mind saying that again? I asked. Slowly. He did. I recorded. At 11:52, the sedan returned. This time, it parked in my driveway like it owned the gravel. 2 men in canvas jackets climbed out, each carrying a clipboard and a confident tilt to the chin that told me they were used to front doors opening. The camera in the birdhouse woke like a small animal and watched. I moved to the porch and stood inside the glass. State your names, I said, loud enough to carry to the recorder. Mr. Collins and Mr. Dane, the taller one said. He was the pleasant voice from last night. His smile sat on his face like a borrowed tie. We're here to assist you with transition and safety. No, thank you, I said. We're not transitioning. He tapped his clipboard. You're in arrears. I nodded. And you are trespassing. Mrs. Carter, he said, sadness buttered over syllables. This is not necessary. We can help you avoid embarrassment. You first, I said. State the agency you represent. He hesitated. The county. Which county? I asked. By its proper name, he recovered quickly. Property Services. Spell it, I said. His gaze flicked to the birdhouse. He couldn't see the lens, but some instinct pricked. We'll mark you as hostile, he said through his teeth. That tends to end badly. For the hostile? I asked mildly. Or for the men who lied on my porch? The second man, Dane, shifted from one foot to the other. Up close, he was fresher than he wanted to appear, with a little ridge of youth across the bridge of his nose where glasses had sat for years and left. Let's go, he muttered. She's recording. Of course she is, Collins said, and leaned in so close his breath fogged the glass. Tell your daughter hello. I blinked. What daughter? He smiled. The one who isn't dead? They left with the self-satisfaction of men who believe they've delivered a message. I kept my face still until the sedan's taillights vanished, then turned to Natalie. She sat very straight, the blanket falling into her lap like skin. He knows, she said. Then he'll make a mistake, I said. People do when they think they've already won. The second hook did not arrive by car or letter. It arrived as a familiar ringtone. I stared at the screen. My son, the boy who cried when he broke the ceramic horse I bought him at the fair. The man who had driven me to the cemetery in a suit 2 sizes too big because he forgot he'd lost weight and didn't want to admit it. I answered because I knew I had to. Mom, he said, and the word cracked. Don't be mad. Evan told me he found Natalie. I'm coming over. I pressed the phone to my ear as if I could catch the truth before it spilled. How does he know anything about my house, Daniel? He exhaled like a punctured tire. He said you were confused. He said you needed help. I looked at my daughter. Her eyes were clear, furious. She shook her head once. Daniel arrived 20 minutes later with his wedding ring twisted backward on his finger, his face both older and younger than the last time I saw him. He stopped in the doorway, seeing Natalie before he saw me. Oh my God, us, he said, and reached, then drew back as if some invisible law forbade it. Where have you been? The right question, I said, is where have you been? He swallowed. Evan said, stop, I said. Think. Would Evan tell you the truth if it cost him money? Daniel's shoulders slumped. He sank into a chair like a boy at the principal's desk. He said he'd fix things for you, he muttered. He said he knew people who could handle the paperwork. What did you sign? I asked. He winced. A referral acknowledgement, he said. He said they needed a family contact to coordinate access. He said you were resisting. I didn't want a scene with strangers on your porch. I thought... He covered his face. God, I thought I was helping. Bring me the paper, I said. All of it. He dug in his backpack and handed me a folder. Inside were 2 sheets, a release with my name typed above his signature, and a page that looked like payment terms with boxes left unchecked. My stomach dropped when I saw the header. Transition and abatement, a division of civic support group, a phone number I didn't recognize, a seal with a misshapen eagle that a child could have drawn better. You didn't know, I said gently, because the part of me that had raised him still spoke in soft weather when he got in trouble. But now you do. He nodded, eyes dark and set. Tell me what to do. Listen, I said. Watch. Don't warn him. For the next 2 hours, we turned our house into a stage. Roger checked angles and batteries. Asha texted to say she'd cleared a conference room at the bank for noon tomorrow and would have someone from the fraud unit present. The church secretary sent a cousin who consults on elder scams and knows a man at the State Insurance Commission. The neighborhood watch group offered a spare pair of eyes and a thermos of chili as if this were a winter storm. My house has always held people. It was good to feel it breathe again. Evan texted Daniel at 3:12. How's Mom? She's still stubborn? Daniel typed, then stopped and looked at me. Say yes, I said. Say you'll be here tomorrow at noon when the bank reviews options? Evan replied immediately. Perfect, I'll meet you there. We'll get this handled. At 5:40, the sedan reappeared with a new driver. This one didn't bother with the porch. He idled in the driveway and took pictures on his phone, lifting it slowly like a tide measuring the posts. The birdhouse camera drank his face and the plates. When he left, I hummed while I basted chicken. You learn to set your life back upright in the places you can, in the minutes that are yours. That night, Natalie slept in my bed, and I took the chair in the corner. I watched the shape of her breathing and wondered why I hadn't questioned the weight of her coffin, the speed of a funeral arranged by men from her husband's church and no one from mine. Grief is a fog and a drug and a pair of hands over your eyes. I forgive myself, now that I have something better to do than blame. We arrived at the bank at 11:50 the next morning. Asha met us at the door and clasped my hands. She possesses what I most admire in women my age and in those destined for it, the ability to be kind without being soft. Conference room B, she said, leading us through the glass and the hum of counting machines. Fraud specialist will join. Do we expect company? 2 kinds, I said. At 12:03, Evan strode in with a smile too white, like a salesman at a wake. He pretended surprise at seeing Natalie, then dropped it because it wasted time. Good, he said. Let's get Mom squared away. I let him call me Mom once, like a line I fed him to pull him forward. We'll hear what the bank says, I said. Then we'll decide. Asha introduced the fraud specialist, a woman with a folder and a Hawk's patience. Roger sat quietly with a capped pen. Daniel took a seat near the door as if he might block it by simply being himself again. Evan opened a briefcase. The document he slid across the table wore its lies like makeup. Too smooth, too bright, too eager. A transfer of authority, a property solution, boxes to tick, and arrows to follow, and a signature line waiting for my hand. Before we talk, Asha said, we need to hear from our client. Mrs. Carter, I lifted the folder I'd brought. I set down the letter from the county affirming no inspection, the audio transcript of the porch visit, the snapshots from the birdhouse camera, the glossy flyer with the fake seal, the referral form Daniel had signed. Last, I placed a picture of Natalie, taken in my kitchen that morning, holding today's newspaper. Evan's smile split. What is this? Evidence, I said. That you lied on my porch. That you used my son's care for me to wedge open my front door. That you used my daughter's death to steal from me. And that my daughter is alive. He laughed, then choked on it when it didn't sound right in the room. She's unstable, he said, gesturing at me. She's been confused for months. Mrs. Carter is very clear, the fraud specialist said, and you are not her counsel. Please sit back. He sat, color flaring high on his cheeks. He looked at Natalie as if she could save him from himself. You were dead, he said softly, like a man trying on a story for a smaller audience. I grieved you. You harvested me, she said, and did not look away. You filed on policies I never signed. You forged a doctor's note. You told my mother I wanted to be cremated, then kept the ashes to show anyone who asked as if you owned my dust. You bought a discount coffin when your deal with the funeral home fell through, and you hovered over it like a hawk so no one would see it was empty. You didn't grieve. You invested. Asha's face didn't change, but something happened behind her eyes, a list drawn, a case assembled. The fraud specialist picked up a phone. I'm calling someone at the state, she said. Please don't leave the room. Evan moved to stand. Daniel rose first and set a hand on his shoulder. Sit, he said, and do not speak unless you're asked a direct question. I thought you were on my side, Evan spat. I was on my mother's, Daniel said. I still am. It didn't take long. When men work their aren't we all friends charm on crowded branches of the public tree, banks, insurers, county offices, they underestimate how quickly the sap can move. A state investigator joined us by video, asked 2 questions, and requested that no one leave. 2 uniformed officers walked in at 12:42 with apologies on their faces for the trouble and the inconvenience and the handcuffs they would very politely fasten if asked. Evan's mouth opened. His story scrambled for daylight. You can tell us everything, the investigator said, voice even, or you can tell it later to someone with a recorder. Either way, it will be told. He began with the things he thought we would forgive: pressure, stress, a little white lie. When those words slid off the table untouched, he fished deeper. A partner made him do it. A man with a trucker's cap threatened to break his knees. He did it to protect Natalie, he said, which was almost funny in a room where she was alive and glaring. I didn't say anything until they stood to take him. Then I leaned forward and let him see every year of my life in my eyes. You should have been afraid of me, I said. He didn't answer. It wouldn't have made a difference. I wish I could tell you that was the end of it, but scavengers circled the place where a carcass was advertised. Men showed up over the next weeks with clipboards and smiles and sad stories. Some were fools, some were desperate. A few had the dead eyes of men who never believed in anything they weren't holding. We recorded them all. We posted a sign in the yard with the county seal and a phone number that led to Terrence's desk and a message that made me smile every time I heard it. Any person contacting this property about safety, transition, abatement, or inspection should leave now. You are being recorded. We filed 3 complaints. We made 1 quiet deal with a kid named Dane who appeared on my porch with shame modeling his neck. He told us names, he gave us numbers. His mother had had a stroke last winter, he said, and the job had seemed like decent money until it was not. I did not forgive him exactly, but I made room for him to step out of the hole he dug. Natalie moved into the spare room. She started with the smallest things: scrubbing the kettle, mending the sleeve of my cardigan, sorting the pile of mail where fear had dropped envelopes like stones. She saw a lawyer who spoke like a clock and smiled like a human being. She told the insurer everything and handed over every scrap. She told the funeral home she would like to speak to the man who had accepted a cash payment from her husband to accelerate arrangements. She told a judge, under oath, that she had never been dead. I planted carrots. It feels silly to say, but growing something you can pull from the ground and wash and eat without a piece of paper telling you it is yours is a quiet revolution you can perform in your yard. I baked, I swept, I sat with my son on the back steps while he cried for the sister he'd been told to grieve twice, once for her death and once because of who he became when he believed it. There was a trial scheduled, and then a different trial, and then a plea. Lawyers do their dance and call it fate. The day Evan changed his plea to guilty, the air felt lighter, as if the house had exhaled. He did not look at us. I did not look away. Justice is not a letter in the mail or a gavel drop on a TV screen. It is a series of small, stubborn acts performed by people who refuse to be erased. It is the way my neighbor crossed the street with a pot of soup and a stack of printouts showing how to freeze my credit. It is the way the bank manager followed up after hours to make sure a clerk had flagged my account in a special way that would trip alarms if anyone tried to attach my property to anything without my voice saying yes. It is the way my church group called every senior on their list to warn them about men with clipboards. It is the way my daughter stood in my doorway with a bruise on her jaw and asked me not to open my door to wolves. I keep the birdhouse camera. I like its black glass eye watching my threshold. I kept the lemon cake recipe on the fridge, a stain of rainwater turning the corner translucent where Natalie set it down that first night. I kept the cardboard funeral card because I am an honest woman, and that day happened. Even if what was inside did not, I kept the folded list of questions I now ask when any paper touches my hand. I also keep a new habit. Every Thursday, I walk the neighborhood with Roger and a group of people who pretend it's for exercise, but really it's a moving wall we provide each other. We talk, we compare notes, we point out the houses where the same sedan lingers too long, we tell stories. Mine starts like this. 5 years ago, I buried my daughter. Today, she lives down the hall. She drinks her coffee on my porch and sometimes leans her head against the doorframe like it could hold her up if the day asks too much. My son comes over with groceries and takes out the trash without being asked. He has learned that being a good man is not a feeling you have, but the verb you perform when someone needs you to show up. My phone rings with unfamiliar numbers and I do not answer. My front door is solid and my chain is strong and my hand is stronger. When I lay in bed at night, my body aches in the good way that tells me I did my work. I think of the empty box we lowered into the ground, of the pitying glances that followed me in the market, of the way men in dark jackets use big words to crowd a woman's doorway. I think of the question that circled my kitchen like a trapped moth. How could my own son-in-law do this to me? The answer is simple and uninteresting. The better question is this: how did we stop him? We answered without raising our voices. We gathered, we recorded, we named, we refused. We chose to believe the person who knocked on the door with rain in her hair and a bruise on her jaw and a voice I recognized from before she ever knew what it meant to be afraid. If you ask me now whether I still bring flowers to the stone with my daughter's name, I will tell you the truth. I do. I bring one for the woman who lies beneath, whose name we do not know, and one for the woman who did not. I leave them there together. Two lives touched by a man who thought paperwork could make his choices permanent. Two lives now touched instead by the quiet persistence of women who came back from something bigger than a scam. On Saturdays, Natalie and I sit on the steps with coffee. She reads the news out loud, and I correct the crossword with a pen like a dare. When a car slows in front of our house, we both glance up. Then we relax because we see our reflection in the glass and it looks like a family that cannot be frightened out of its own doorway. I have not forgiven him. I do not plan to. The forgiveness I have is for myself, for not questioning when grief wrapped itself around my head and gently turned me away from the obvious. The rest is for my hands, which learned new habits, and my feet, which learned new routes, and my voice, which learned not to apologize for taking up space. If you are listening and you are my age or somewhere near and you have a house with a door and a mailbox and a kettle that sings when company arrives, hear me. You are not alone in your kitchen. There are more of us than there are of them. And our justice, though it takes its time, is not a rumor. It is a thing that sits down at your table, pours tea, and stays.
My grandma told me this story. I have many more stories. Subscribe so you don't miss the most interesting things.